Welcome to Lotus Tale Studios. I hope you enjoy this story of betrayal, rebirth, and revenge. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. My husband had a concubine whom he treated with utter contempt. He cherished me as his legitimate wife, yet showered affection on his newly acquired beauty. Only toward her was he cold and merciless. At the slightest mistake, he would scold and confine her to her quarters for days on end. I pitied the poor girl trapped in this household, so I always protected and defended her. But I never expected that after I died giving birth to our child, my husband would immediately elevate her to be his legitimate wife, giving her everything that had belonged to me, my entire dowry, my jewelry, my status, my place, everything I had worked for. Only then did I understand that Chen Ziming's cruelty toward her wasn't because he despised her, but because he loved her too deeply and used deception to shield her from jealousy and harm. I was consumed with rage beyond measure. Let me tell you about my first life, the life I lived before heaven granted me a second chance at justice. I was Lin Wanying, second daughter of the prestigious Lin household, raised by my legitimate mother alongside my beloved older sister who became the current empress. Chen Ziming came to propose marriage himself, arriving at our gates with an elaborate procession. He said that at the flower viewing banquet hosted by the eldest princess, he fell in love with me at first sight and simply had to marry me. He was eloquent, charming, seemingly sincere. I was flattered, charmed, completely fooled by his performance. After our wedding ceremony, he seemed utterly devoted to me. We appeared to everyone as a loving, harmonious couple. I managed the household diligently, served my mother-in-law with utmost respect, treated the servants with appropriate kindness, and was especially sympathetic to the concubines in the household, particularly one named Bai Qianxue. She was my mother-in-law's cousin's daughter, betrothed to Ziming before birth according to family arrangements, childhood sweethearts who grew up together playing in the same courtyards. But when she came of age and was preparing for marriage, her family fell into sudden disgrace when her father was convicted of corruption, and she became the daughter of a convicted criminal. Not only was the engagement immediately broken for political reasons, but she could only enter the Chen household as a lowly concubine to her former fiancé, the man she'd loved since childhood. At first, I was naturally wary and concerned. How could there be no lingering feelings between childhood sweethearts who'd planned to marry? But Ziming treated her with shocking, brutal coldness that seemed excessive even by concubine standards. He scolded her constantly over trivial matters, deprived her of proper food and adequate clothing, and confined her to her quarters at the slightest provocation or imagined offense. Sometimes even I thought his treatment was far too harsh and cruel. I came to believe sincerely that my husband truly hated this concubine his mother had forced upon him against his will. As a woman myself, I felt profound sorry for her tragic fate and always took special care of her needs. When the palace rewarded our household with rare southern fruits as imperial favor, all the masters and mistresses received generous portions except Qianxue. Ziming deliberately gave her nothing at all. I secretly sent my entire share to her room through trusted servants. Since my sister was the empress, such exotic delicacies weren't particularly rare in the Lin household anyway, and I was honestly tired of eating them. In winter, every room had sufficient heating charcoal and thick cotton quilts, but Qianxue's humble room only had last year's worn, thin bedding and often completely lacked charcoal for heating. Knowing the servants were deliberately bullying her because of her low status, I specifically reprimanded the household steward severely and had my personal maid deliver brand new winter clothes and extra charcoal from my own stores. When she was maliciously framed by other jealous concubines for stealing jewelry and couldn't properly defend herself, only able to repeat helplessly, "I have 100 mouths but cannot explain my innocence," Ziming didn't bother investigating the truth at all and wanted to immediately confine her as punishment. But I painstakingly uncovered the actual truth through careful investigation, cleared her name publicly, and restored her freedom and reputation within the household. Then I died in childbirth. The labor was agonizing and endless, lasting for 2 full days and nights. The midwife kept saying the baby's position was completely normal, not too large at all. There was no medical reason for such difficulty. Yet I couldn't deliver no matter how hard I pushed and strained. I bled continuously and screamed until my voice gave out entirely, until my vision darkened at the edges, until I felt my soul slowly slip from my exhausted body like water through cupped hands. I thought my life, though brief and cut short, had been fulfilling and meaningful. I had been a good wife, a kind mistress to servants, a virtuous woman according to all proper standards. But my soul didn't enter reincarnation as it should have. Instead, I lingered in the mortal world, invisible and insubstantial, watching everything unfold. I saw Ziming eagerly claim my entire substantial dowry the very day after my funeral and give absolutely everything to Bai Qianxue without hesitation. He immediately elevated her to be his legitimate wife, the new mistress of the household, and personally entered the palace to request an imperial title for her from the emperor himself. Qianxue completely transformed overnight from her previous pitiful, constantly suffering appearance. She wore the expensive brocade robes and precious Persian silks my sister had personally gifted me, covered herself lavishly in the gold and jade jewelry from my dowry, like a butterfly finally emerging into brilliant sunlight after years in darkness, showing off everywhere she went, laughing with other noble ladies. She withheld the servants' proper wages arbitrarily, made life deliberately difficult for the other concubines out of petty revenge, spent money like water flowing without any restraint or economy. But Ziming didn't care at all about any of this wasteful behavior. Instead, he indulged her every single whim and excess, praising her newfound spirit and confidence, calling her finally free to be herself. Watching them inseparable and shameless together, constantly touching and whispering, I finally understood the devastating truth. His cold, brutal treatment of her had never been from lack of love or genuine dislike. He had treasured her so profoundly that he used elaborate cruelty as careful camouflage to protect her from my potential jealousy, from my powerful family's influence, from any possible harm I might do her if I knew his true feelings. It turned out they had been playing me for a complete fool all along, laughing behind my back. My soul wept bitter tears and raged impotently, trapped between heaven and earth, unable to move on or find peace. Then, miraculously beyond all expectation, I opened my eyes again. I was alive, young, whole, back in my own body. Heaven had given me another precious chance at justice and revenge, returned me to the second day after our wedding ceremony. This time, I swore on everything I held sacred, I would carefully watch and manipulate events. Without my help propping him up, how much hardship could this so-called true love actually endure? Wanying, this is Bai Qianxue that mother absolutely insists I must take as concubine to honor old family obligations. You don't need to worry about her at all or give her any thought. You are my legitimate wife, one lifetime, one couple united. I only have genuine feelings for you alone. As soon as I opened my eyes in this new timeline, I saw my husband Chen Ziming intimately holding my hand by the bedside, speaking words both seemingly tender and ultimately heartless. Below, a woman in plain, undyed cloth knelt with her head bowed submissively, her expression carefully hidden, holding up a delicate porcelain teacup with both trembling hands, waiting patiently for me to accept it as ritual demanded. I immediately knew with absolute certainty I had been reborn. Returned precisely to this exact moment, when the concubine Qianxue served tea to me for the first time as new mistress. In my previous life, I had accepted the cup without any suspicion or guard, not expecting the tea inside to be deliberately scalding hot, far too hot to hold comfortably. I couldn't maintain my grip and the cup shattered dramatically on the floor, tea splashing everywhere. Qianxue was so frightened by this disaster she kowtowed repeatedly, frantically apologizing, the spilled hot tea mixing with her long black hair and streaming tears. Her pitiful appearance, like pure white blossoms drenched in sudden rain, was genuinely heartbreaking to witness. And I was immediately caught up in Ziming's flustered concern and attention, his gentle hands carefully examining my burned fingers, his worried questions about my pain, his tender offers to blow on the injury to make it feel better. One person tenderly held and fussed over in her husband's protective palm. One person kneeling miserably on the hard ground with tears streaming down her face. Such a stark, dramatic contrast made absolutely everyone present think I had deliberately dropped the teacup out of petty jealousy and spite. From that single calculated moment, I gained an immediate reputation throughout the household for being a jealous wife who deliberately mistreated innocent concubines. But at the time, I was so completely immersed in Ziming's apparent favoritism and devoted attention that I didn't want to argue or defend myself. I secretly rejoiced inside, foolishly thinking I had found a husband who truly loved me above all others. I completely failed to notice or question that the genuine pain and concern in his eyes wasn't actually for me at all, but for the woman crying on the floor. Thinking of this now, the burning sensation still seemed to linger painfully on my fingertips like a brand. I withdrew my hand smoothly from Ziming's possessive grasp, arranged my lap modestly with an embroidered silk handkerchief, and looked directly at Qianxue, who appeared so convincingly weak and harmless kneeling in the reception hall. This tea is far too hot to drink comfortably. I'll wait and drink it when it cools to proper temperature. Without accepting the cup, she had absolutely no choice but to keep holding it up in offering position, arms extended. Qianxue clearly hadn't expected me to see through her calculated trick so easily. Hearing my calm words, she instinctively raised her head in surprise, saw the knowing, amused smile on my face, then quickly looked desperately toward Ziming for rescue and instruction, conveniently switching hands to hold the teacup since her fingers must have been burning painfully. She must have been enduring the scalding heat to her absolute limit already. Ziming, receiving his beauty's silent plea for help through their practiced eye contact, immediately cleared his throat loudly to get my attention. If the tea is too hot, just have the servants bring another cup at proper temperature. Simple solution. I raised my hand in a gentle but firm gesture to stop the maid who was already stepping forward obediently to fetch fresh tea. My husband advocates thrift and careful economy in all household matters. The Chen household has extensive properties and numerous business expenses to maintain. We must be even more careful and deliberate with our resources and spending. Wasting a perfectly good cup of expensive tea is improper and sets a bad example. It's not too late at all to drink it when it cools down naturally. After speaking with perfect wifely logic, I calmly closed my eyes, deliberately ignoring the two people who had visibly stiffened in shock at being outmaneuvered, and let the maid standing behind me gently massage my shoulders to relieve tension. The entire room fell into uncomfortable silence except for the faint clinking sound of the teacup lid trembling in Qianxue's increasingly unsteady hands. In my previous life, everyone said I was viciously jealous and deliberately cruel to concubines. If I don't put on an appropriately impressive show this time around, wouldn't that be a complete waste of my hard-earned terrible reputation? After quite a while passed, I felt the pressure and technique on my shoulders change subtly. It must be Ziming now, having dismissed the maid with a gesture, personally massaging his beloved wife's shoulders himself, playing the devoted, affectionate husband for any servants watching. If my soul hadn't lingered after death in my previous life, witnessing everything, I might have always believed until my dying day that he loved me to the very bone, that I was his true treasure. I judged enough time had passed. I slowly opened my eyes with deliberate leisure. By this point, Qianxue had endured the heat until she was visibly trembling all over, clearly on the verge of tears she was desperately trying to hold back, her arms shaking constantly from the strain, making the teacup lid clatter audibly against the rim. Only then did I graciously reach out to finally accept the cup from her aching hands. Just as I brought it close to my lips, preparing to drink, I frowned with apparent displeasure. This tea has gone completely cold now. Undrinkable. Her arm had just begun to lower in relief when she heard my new complaint, and the tears she'd been valiantly holding back finally spilled freely down her pale cheeks, her expression one of utter heartbreak and exhaustion. Ziming couldn't sit still any longer, immediately urging the servants with poorly concealed anxiety. Quickly, hurry up and bring another cup of tea at the proper temperature right now. When she nervously offered the fresh cup with appropriate warmth a few minutes later, I finally drank it with a small nod of satisfaction, savoring it slowly. After the tea ceremony concluded according to proper ritual, it was my turn as new mistress to give her an appropriate greeting gift. Everyone in the room watched with great interest as I touched my sleeve consideringly, my fingers passing deliberately over the flawless translucent jade bracelet circling my wrist, clearly very valuable. I adjusted my elaborate hair ornaments with my other hand, caressing the heavy pure gold hairpin that secured my formal hairstyle. Then my fingers drifted to the sparkling ruby earrings dangling from my ears, but didn't stop or remove them. Instead, I gestured for my personal maid to bend down close, took a pair of extremely ordinary, simple pearl earrings from her discreetly offered hand, and ordered the maid to formally present them to Qianxue as my gift. A gift from the mistress cannot be refused according to household rules and proper etiquette. She slowly, reluctantly reached out to accept them in both hands, her face carefully blank but her eyes revealing her humiliation. Ziming sitting beside me couldn't contain himself anymore, his diplomatic smile slipping. Wanying, this seems somewhat beneath the dignity and reputation of the Chen household. If word of such a modest gift spreads outside, I'm afraid it will damage our family's standing and reputation significantly. I blinked my eyes with exaggerated innocent confusion and explained with utmost apparent sincerity. My husband doesn't understand my genuinely thoughtful intentions at all. I specifically noticed Sister Qianxue is dressed entirely in plain white clothing. She must still be properly observing the mourning period for her late family members. But she wears only a pair of jade bracelets for adornment, which isn't entirely appropriate for someone in mourning. I thought perhaps she was careless about proper etiquette, or perhaps her jewelry box lacks suitable plain ornaments for this solemn mourning time. The jewelry I wear daily is far too bright and colorful for someone in mourning. So I could only specially select a pair of appropriately modest pearl earrings to complete her ensemble properly and show respect for the dead. Husband, please rest completely assured. My maid has faithfully followed me for many years and received numerous valuable rewards over time, so these particular pearl earrings are definitely not ordinary cheap items. The actual value of this single pair could equal Sister Qianxue's entire current worth as a person. Seeing the two of them struggling desperately to formulate any response, speechless with suppressed anger and unable to object without appearing ungrateful, I smiled even more brightly and innocently. The Bai family's official mourning period had actually passed long ago according to law and custom. She wore white exclusively only to deliberately show off her slender, graceful figure and to make Ziming constantly pity her fragile, sorrowful appearance and shower her with protective attention. But now I trapped them both quite cleverly in their own deception. If she wasn't genuinely mourning her family, then what exactly was she mourning? Mourning for the country and emperor? His Majesty the Emperor was still in perfect health and vigorous strength. That interpretation would be high treason and sedition. They absolutely wouldn't dare claim that reasoning. Ziming forced an extremely stiff smile and placed his hand on my shoulder with what probably looked like affection to observers. Wanying is still the most thoughtful and proper in all matters. You're absolutely right. It's getting quite late now. We still need to pay our respects to Mother before the day ends. Seeing me nod obediently in agreement and rise to follow along, the two of them secretly breathed obvious sighs of relief, thinking they'd escaped. I suddenly turned back at the doorway, meeting Qianxue's hateful and deeply resentful gaze directly. I raised an eyebrow deliberately and smiled with genuine charm. Husband, I heard Sister Qianxue used to reside in Mother's courtyard before you formally took her as concubine. Now that she's properly entered your personal service, we must naturally find her appropriate private accommodation soon. I'm still quite new to the household and unfamiliar with such logistical matters. Perhaps husband should personally decide where Sister Qianxue should rest each night going forward. Ziming's jaw visibly twitched, his teeth audibly grinding together. Then she can have the bamboo garden in the northwest corner. I agreed sweetly and submissively, but was genuinely surprised inside my mind. The bamboo garden was located near the side gate in the remote northwest corner, by far the most desolate and neglected location in the entire extensive manor. In my previous life, Ziming definitely hadn't placed her in such a terrible place initially. It seemed the development of future events would indeed change dramatically according to my new attitude and actions. At this very moment, Qianxue standing behind us couldn't bear the situation anymore, lowering her head as soft sobs escaped her throat despite her efforts at control. That night, a servant came to report formally that the master would sleep in his study tonight. Then my personal maid Chunhua quietly slipped into my chambers and reported in a whisper pressed close to my ear. I've investigated everything clearly, miss. The master secretly took the small back path leading to the northwest courtyard area late tonight. Miss, should we send someone to observe or intervene? I sat calmly at my dressing table, gazing at my beautiful, youthful face reflected in the polished bronze mirror, and smiled with cold mockery. He must be rushing desperately to comfort his precious beloved after she suffered such public injustice and humiliation during the day. The poor thing. The reflection in the mirror shook her head very slightly. No matter at all. Have someone prepare hot water for me to bathe properly and retire for the night. I need my rest. The maids busied themselves efficiently with their assigned tasks. After Chunhua finished carefully removing all my elaborate hairpins and ornaments, placing each valuable piece in its proper storage box, I handed her a small, exquisite brocade box containing a pair of gold-inlaid amber earrings, far more valuable than anything she'd normally possess. Trade these expensive earrings for those simple pearl earrings you gave me earlier. Do you agree to this exchange? These were the exact same gift I'd given Qianxue in my previous life, probably worth 100 times more than the simple pearls. Chunhua firmly accepted them with both hands, her smile so wide and delighted her eyes nearly disappeared into happy crescents. Thank you so much, Miss. Miss treats this servant better than anyone in the world. I was genuinely infected by her pure, uncomplicated joy, my own eyes crinkling with warmth. With my substantial dowry properties and investments, these trivial luxury items meant absolutely nothing to me financially. But in this life, I absolutely refused to spend even a single coin nurturing ungrateful betrayers who would eventually destroy me. In my previous life, I'd accidentally discovered Qianxue staying up extremely late embroidering handkerchiefs by dim, flickering candlelight and learned through careful inquiry that she was deeply ashamed of her constantly empty purse and could only rely on selling embroidered items for desperately needed extra income. Previously, when she lived comfortably with my mother-in-law in the main family quarters, she didn't need to worry about daily household expenses or managing servant wages. But after officially becoming Ziming's personal concubine with her own separate residence, all social obligations and servant management costs had to come from her own modest monthly allowance. The Chen household had truly extensive operational expenses. When her family met complete disaster and the Chen household took her in out of supposed charitable obligation to distant relatives, she didn't have a single copper coin to her name. No dowry whatsoever, no private business ventures generating supplemental income. Plus, Ziming never publicly rewarded her with silver or valuable gifts where others could witness. So her basic monthly stipend was chronically insufficient for her actual needs and the servants' expected management. That's precisely why I'd always had trusted servants discreetly sell her handkerchiefs for her, then secretly buying them back myself at many times their actual market worth while strictly instructing the servants never to reveal this charitable arrangement to anyone. Now, thinking back with complete clarity and cold calculation, saving all that wasted silver to spend generously on those who truly treated me well and remained loyal, wasn't that infinitely more worthwhile and intelligent? The next morning arrived with pale sunlight. I led an entire group of household servants directly to the remote bamboo garden. Because Ziming had secretly visited here during the night without bringing his own personal attendants or properly announcing himself, I knew exactly what scene I would discover. I stood in the badly neglected courtyard filled with fallen leaves, overgrown weeds, and clear signs of abandonment. Through the thin cloth window covering, I could vaguely make out the silhouettes of two people inside who had obviously just awakened from sleep. Qianxue was helping Ziming dress properly in his formal outer robes. After a quiet moment, she suddenly embraced him tightly from behind, her voice achingly gentle and vulnerable. "Brother Ziming, I'm trapped in such a broken, miserable courtyard like a prisoner. It must be so terribly difficult for you to come see me here in secret." Ziming turned in her arms and tenderly pinched her small nose affectionately. "With you always in my heart, naturally I'm willing to endure any hardship or inconvenience to stay by your side. Distance means nothing." Not receiving a truly satisfactory answer about her living situation, Qianxue paused, then buried her pale face against his broad chest. "Since I'm truly in your heart as you claim, why do you keep me isolated in such a remote and desolate place? In the future, if I want to see you even once, I'll have to walk such a great, exhausting distance just to reach the main house. Do you understand? Yesterday when I first arrived here alone, absolutely everything was covered in thick dust and massive cobwebs everywhere. I had to clean for many hours before I could even temporarily settle in for the night." Ziming lovingly embraced her even closer, his voice full of tender explanation and justification. "Yesterday the lady deliberately made things difficult for you in front of everyone, publicly humiliating you. It must be because you revealed too much of your genuine feelings through your expressions, which annoyed and threatened her. If I don't consistently demonstrate extreme dislike and coldness toward you in public, when she grows jealous and vindictive, won't you suffer even more terribly under her authority? Everything I do, every harsh word and cold action, is purely for your protection and safety, my precious love." She raised her head, crystalline tears glistening like precious pearls in her reddened eyes. "Brother Ziming, why must you be so extremely cautious and fearful of her? She's merely a secondary daughter of the Lin household, not even legitimate. How foolish and ignorant can one person possibly be? Although she's technically a secondary daughter, she was raised under her legitimate mother's direct care since early childhood and maintains an extremely close, affectionate relationship with the current empress herself. The Chen household's continued prosperity, imperial favor, and political influence still depends heavily and almost entirely on this crucial connection to the throne. So naturally, we must be extraordinarily careful not to offend her or provoke her powerful family in any way." These harsh but brutally honest words made me even more clear-headed about my actual position and value in this marriage. The reason father didn't refuse Ziming's marriage proposal outright was because he came from the distinguished Chen noble house with an impressive lineage. His father died when Ziming was still young and his widowed mother raised him alone with great difficulty and sacrifice. He inherited his late father's noble title at a remarkably young age, becoming the youngest marquis serving at court, technically a suitable match for me, the secondary daughter of the Lin household. Or rather more accurately, I was actually reaching somewhat above my proper station by marrying into such established nobility. But thinking back now with completely unclouded eyes and understanding, he'd actually valued precisely my status as a secondary daughter who would be easier to control and manipulate than a legitimate heir. He'd deliberately targeted my extremely close relationship with my older sister who had become empress. The Chen family lineage had produced remarkably few male descendants for several generations, with weak, powerless branch families and virtually no meaningful power base at court, growing increasingly insignificant and forgotten with each passing year. There were no suitable young ladies of appropriate rank available in the extended imperial family for a marriage alliance. So he could only propose to me, subsequently becoming sworn brothers with the emperor himself through this connection to gain precious opportunities for political advancement and imperial favor. In my previous life, I'd foolishly thought it was genuine mutual affection and romantic love at first sight. Immediately after our wedding ceremony concluded, I'd eagerly entered the palace to personally ask my sister to grant him a government position with real administrative power and influence. The current emperor greatly valued and cherished the empress above all others, so naturally he agreed to such a seemingly small request without any hesitation, wanting to please his beloved wife. In this life, I thought with cold satisfaction, let's see how far your precious true love can actually carry you without my essential help and connections. The two inside the room were still intimately entangled, whispering sweet reassurances and promises. "Rest completely assured, my feelings will never change toward you. You must trust my devotion to you absolutely and completely. We've harbored deep feelings for each other for so many years since childhood. If not for her family background and critical political connections, I wouldn't even glance in her direction once, much less touch her or share her bed. Do you still remember clearly the poem I sent you in that secret letter years ago? Heaven never ages, true love is eternal and unchanging. Hearts intertwined like silk threads, bound together in thousands of complicated knots." Qianxue immediately stopped crying and smiled radiantly, reciting the next line in perfect unison with him, their voices blending. "Hearts like double silk nets, with thousands upon thousands of knots inside binding us." Ziming nodded with deep satisfaction and obvious pleasure. "Exactly right, perfectly remembered. Your complete understanding of my true heart brings me such profound comfort. Bear with these temporary hardships for just this brief period. Later, I absolutely promise I'll repay you 1,000, 10,000 times over for everything you've endured for our love." Hearing this grandiose, empty promise, I laughed coldly to myself where I stood hidden. Such arrogant, foolish boasting. 1,000, 10,000 times repayment. Let's see if you even have that opportunity in this lifetime, you pathetic, deluded fool. Qianxue shyly agreed with downcast eyes, sitting gracefully on the floor to help him with his shoes and outer robes. "I'm mentally prepared to suffer any hardship imaginable as long as your heart remains true to me alone." Ziming appeared extremely satisfied with her compliant, accepting attitude, affectionately pinching her pale cheek with a bright, genuine smile of pleasure. He turned casually to open the door and stepped outside, coming face to face with me standing prominently in the overgrown courtyard, leading an entire organized group of household servants. Wan Wanying. Why are you here at this hour? Ziming's smile froze grotesquely on his handsome face, his eyes darting frantically in obvious panic, calculating rapidly. I pretended with perfect acting not to have heard anything whatsoever through the thin walls, keeping my expression pleasantly neutral and concerned. Yesterday, Sister Qianxue served me tea so diligently and properly. I didn't notice at the time that her delicate fingertips were actually burned quite badly by the excessive heat. After returning to my chambers last night, my observant maid informed me and I finally learned about her painful injury. I felt terribly guilty for my oversight. After all, I was careless and inattentive to her suffering. It must have been negligent servants who brought improperly prepared tea, causing Sister to suffer this unnecessary injury. Such careless, incompetent servants absolutely cannot be kept in this household where they might cause further harm. So today I came early specifically to replace Sister Qianxue's entire household staff with more attentive, capable, properly trained people to prevent such unfortunate incidents in the future. After speaking calmly and reasonably, I gestured toward the servants standing in neat rows behind me with lowered gazes and respectful postures, ready to serve. Only then did Ziming gradually relax his panicked expression slightly, raising his hand to wipe away non-existent perspiration from his damp forehead. No need for such drastic measures at all. She can manage perfectly well with. I smoothly interrupted him before he could finish. Husband also came here early this morning to personally visit Sister Qianxue and check on her welfare. How extraordinarily thoughtful and kind you are. Ziming frantically shook his head in vigorous denial. No, absolutely not. I was merely taking a morning constitutional walk for my health and happened to pass by this direction completely coincidentally. After speaking with transparent dishonesty, he pretended nothing unusual had occurred and began walking away briskly toward the main house. I deliberately called after him with innocent, sweet concern. That's quite fortunate then, husband. I have precious burn medicine that was specially rewarded by the Imperial Palace physicians. I absolutely guarantee Sister Qianxue will heal quickly without any permanent scarring after applying it consistently according to instructions. Such valuable imperial medicine shouldn't be wasted on minor injuries. He didn't turn back, his voice tight and strained with barely controlled emotion. No need whatsoever for such extravagance. Such a minor, insignificant wound will heal perfectly fine on its own without any special intervention. Her lowly status doesn't merit such exceptionally valuable treatment meant exclusively for nobility and imperial family. I glanced sideways discreetly and saw the hopeful light in Qianxue's desperate eyes suddenly dim and die completely. I smiled brilliantly and called out loudly so all the servants could hear clearly. Then I'll respectfully follow husband's wise judgment on this matter completely. Without Ziming's interference or objections blocking me, the carefully selected loyal servants were successfully delivered to Qianxue's courtyard and formally installed in her household staff. After returning to my own comfortable chambers, Chunhua asked with genuine puzzlement and confusion. Madam specifically chose the most loyal, capable, trustworthy servants in our entire household for her benefit. Why give such valuable people to someone like her who doesn't deserve them? I casually flipped through detailed account books without looking up from the neat columns of numbers and expenses. Precisely because they're proven to be completely loyal to me, I can rest entirely assured placing them beside Qianxue to work for my interests and observe for me, not hers. Besides, we have abundant financial resources, well-established training methods, and experienced senior people available to train brand new servants from scratch. Are we truly afraid of lacking loyal people in our direct service? Moreover, no matter how stupid Qianxue might be, she definitely won't use people I personally sent as her intimate personal maids for private matters, so they won't actually suffer alongside her inevitable misfortunes. They'll simply collect their generous monthly wages leisurely without performing much real work. Their official employment contracts remain firmly in my legal possession and control. If Qianxue cannot properly manage or control them effectively, that naturally works entirely in my favor and provides me useful information. My highly visible actions this morning, personally visiting the lowly concubine's remote quarters early, generously giving trained servants and offering precious imperial medicine, will spread as gossip throughout the entire household and beyond into society. Ultimately, it will significantly enhance my public reputation for exceptional kindness, virtue, and proper wifely conduct. Meanwhile, she suffers in increasing isolation without actually benefiting. Perfect. Ziming was evidently afraid I'd grown suspicious of his nighttime activities and secret movements, so he deliberately avoided visiting Qianxue's residence for a considerable while, instead coming faithfully to my chambers every single night to perform affection and devoted husbandly attention. I didn't refuse his presence or intimate attentions either. After all, to successfully turn the tables and secure my position permanently in this treacherous household, I urgently needed to produce a legitimate heir as soon as possible. A son would be my ultimate protection and source of unassailable power. Poor abandoned Qianxue, suddenly deprived of her lover's favor and attention, found that the household servants no longer respected or feared her at all. Her clothing alterations and repairs remained perpetually unfinished despite repeated requests. Every single meal consisted of cold, congealed leftovers obviously scraped from others' plates, sometimes even spoiled. Besides the personal maid who served directly beside the legitimate mistress, all other servants nominally assigned to her courtyard conveniently went to eat their own communal meals in the warm main kitchens, completely unaffected by her hardship and deprivation. Only Qianxue's stubbornly loyal personal maid Xiaomai had to suffer the same terrible deprivations alongside her mistress out of devotion. This devoted maid once bravely questioned the servants delivering the completely inadequate food portions, but was mocked cruelly and dismissively in response. "Who told your mistress to foolishly choose the courtyard located farthest from the main kitchens? Isn't it completely normal and expected for food to grow cold during such a long journey in winter weather? Instead of expressing appropriate gratitude that we even bother traveling so far at all to serve her, you actually dare complain about quality and temperature. With that spare time and energy, why not think of effective ways to please the master and improve your mistress's terrible situation through service?" Such blunt, deliberately insulting words made both mistress and servant furious but completely helpless to change anything. After Qianxue finished venting her impotent rage privately, the observant servants I'd strategically placed beside her dutifully reported back that she was preparing to come find me to lodge a formal complaint. In my previous life, she'd also come to tearfully plead with me at this exact juncture in our relationship. At that time, I'd righteously punished all the related servants after hearing her pitiful story, severely docking their monthly wages as appropriate punishment, which naturally made the entire servant staff resent me deeply and whisper about my interference. Meanwhile, Qianxue not only had her normal living conditions completely restored to proper standards, but even received substantial compensation payments from my personal funds. Her daily meals became even more luxurious and abundant than mine as the legitimate wife, an absurd situation. In this life, I absolutely refused to play the kind fool anymore. Knowing Qianxue was planning to come petition me, I deliberately had someone urgently invite Ziming to join us for the evening meal. When she finally arrived at my elegant chambers, we were peacefully enjoying our dinner together at a beautifully set table. She entered hesitantly, visibly sniffing the wonderfully aromatic dishes, her hungry eyes involuntarily glancing at our abundant dining table laden with various delicacies, secretly swallowing excess saliva before she suddenly burst into pitiful tears and began her obviously rehearsed complaints. "Brother Ziming, you simply don't know how viciously those cruel, heartless servants mistreat me every single day. The food delivered to my residence arrives completely cold and essentially inedible every time without exception. Dishes that should clearly contain fresh vegetables are instead covered in disgusting thick layers of congealed animal fat. The duck soup is so unbearably fishy I absolutely cannot swallow even a single spoonful without violently gagging," she sobbed dramatically, her thin shoulders shaking. "How much longer must I endure living like this in such unbearable misery?" Ziming cautiously glanced sideways at my completely neutral, unmoved expression. Seeing I remained utterly unaffected and showed no signs of sympathy, he had no choice but to take the initiative himself to address the situation. "Wanying, perhaps you should address." I gracefully ladled a generous bowl of steaming hot tofu and vegetable soup for him, my demeanor gentle and perfectly obedient. "Sister Qianxue is husband's person, naturally belonging to your household. I must respectfully listen to husband's judgment and decisions on such matters. His mouth twitched with barely suppressed frustration, but he was forced by circumstances to continue playing his assigned role, turning to scold Qianxue with loud, harsh reprimands. Having any vegetables and meat at all in your meals is already 100 times superior to what common ordinary families can afford to eat daily. Yet you stand here being unreasonably picky and particular about quality and temperature. That's truly ungrateful and completely inappropriate behavior. Look carefully at what the lady and I eat every day. Isn't our meal also quite simple and modest in comparison to truly extravagant banquets? Recently I'd been suffering poor appetite due to very early pregnancy symptoms, so the kitchen staff had deliberately prepared lighter, easier fare at my request. At this convenient moment, our simple meal was perfectly used by Ziming for his false comparison and theatrical performance. Qianxue cried even harder, wanting desperately to explain and defend herself with a few clarifying words, but meeting the man's severe warning gaze burning intensely into her, she was forced to swallow back her grievances painfully. She held back her tears with tremendous visible effort and bowed deeply to take her leave. After dismissing Qianxue, Ziming's longing gaze lingered obviously and far too long on her retreating back, following her departure almost against his will. Turning around to discover me watching him with meaningful, knowing attention, he immediately plastered on an ingratiating smile, picking up a choice piece of tender fish for my bowl. Wanying, come now. Don't let unrelated, insignificant people disturb our pleasant meal together. After we finished dinner, Ziming approached me with obvious nervousness, stammering awkwardly like a guilty child. Wanying, I heard you entered the palace today for a visit. Did you happen to meet with the Empress during your time there? No wonder he was suddenly anxious and unusually attentive tonight. Though he'd already inherited his late father's prestigious noble title for quite some time now, he still hadn't actually entered the imperial court as an official with real duties and responsibilities, remaining essentially an idle, useless nobleman living off inherited wealth and reputation. If this embarrassing situation continued indefinitely, not only would he gradually fall into the family's secondary, insignificant ranks among nobility, but eventually even future generations might completely forget the Chen household's very existence and former glory. In my previous life, I'd naively and eagerly asked my sister to secure him a position in the prestigious censorate. Though the initial rank wasn't particularly high or immediately impressive, officials serving there could supervise and impeach all other court officials and could potentially be greatly valued by the emperor for their integrity and independence. Indeed, not long afterward, Ziming had made significant contributions in investigating and exposing a major prince's attempted rebellion case. He was rapidly promoted to left vice-censor-in-chief with seemingly limitless future prospects for continued advancement. In this life, I hadn't entered the palace to request any official position for him whatsoever. Instead, I'd gone exclusively for my own critical purposes and protection. In my previous life, the agonizing difficult childbirth had become a source of absolute terror lodged deep in my traumatized heart. Since being miraculously granted this precious rebirth, I was absolutely determined to safely deliver a healthy heir. But I remained deeply afraid of somehow repeating that nightmare. So I'd specifically asked the Empress to grant me an experienced palace nanny with comprehensive expertise in childbirth. The dangerous tricks and malicious schemes within the palace were infinitely worse than anything outside in ordinary noble households. Having such an experienced, knowledgeable nanny would help guide me through pregnancy and childbirth with maximum safety and expert care. As for Ziming, I'd only mentioned him extremely casually at the very end of our long conversation, suggesting vaguely the Empress might conveniently find him some idle official position to keep him nominally occupied if it wasn't too much trouble. I sipped my fragrant tea slowly and deliberately, drawing out the suspense. Under his pathetically expectant, almost desperate gaze, I spoke with calculated leisure. Husband, just wait patiently for the official imperial announcement in due time. Ziming's eyes lit up dramatically with undisguised eagerness and pure greed. Has Wanying actually succeeded in this? Can you reveal just a small hint about what position might be offered? I paused for effect. The Bureau of Rights and Protocol. Official court positions varied enormously in actual rank and real power, some carrying genuine authority and influence while others were merely ceremonial and meaningless. My sister had agreed to let Ziming enter the Bureau of Rights, managing diplomatic ceremonies and relations with foreign envoys. It sounded impressively important and significant to outsiders, but was actually far inferior to the censorate's lower rank yet substantial real investigative power and direct access to the emperor. But for Ziming, who'd never held any official government position whatsoever his entire adult life, merely entering the imperial court at all was apparently extraordinarily satisfying and more than sufficient. Indeed, hearing this news, he couldn't hide his overwhelming joy and excitement at all. Wanying, marrying you is truly my greatest fortune and blessing in this lifetime. I'm the luckiest man alive. He rubbed his hands together eagerly like an excited child on festival day. Then I'll go immediately to my study to begin preparing thoroughly and studying relevant protocols. You should rest early tonight and take excellent care of yourself. I nodded graciously, watching his delighted departure with cold, calculating eyes that saw through everything, then suddenly felt my stomach violently churn without warning. I vomited up everything I'd just carefully eaten. The next morning arrived cold and grey. I felt unusually lazy and completely drained of energy. The maids in my chambers tried every possible method to lift my spirits and cheer me up, but I remained listlessly uninterested in anything they suggested. Chen Ziming hurried in from outside, bending to whisper urgently in my ear with barely suppressed amusement. "Miss, I have something extremely interesting to report. Would you like to hear it?" She gestured meaningfully with her head toward the northwest direction where Qianxue resided in isolation. I leaned back against my comfortable chair, covering my tired eyes with a cool silk handkerchief to block the harsh morning sunlight streaming through the windows. "Go ahead and tell me everything." Last night, after returning to his study, the master secretly dispatched his most trusted personal servant to deliver something to Miss Bai's residence under cover of darkness. Can you possibly guess what it was? I considered thoughtfully for a moment. Expensive pastries from the best shop. Bird's nest soup. Rare new tea leaves from the south. The little beauty trapped in his heart had been crying and complaining so pitifully for so long. Even if he doesn't dare care for her openly in front of others where I might see, he absolutely must compensate her generously behind everyone's backs to soothe her hurt feelings and demonstrate his continued devotion, correct? Chen Ziming shook her head vigorously. None of those things at all, miss. It was merely a letter. Just a simple letter. I couldn't help laughing aloud at the absurdity, the sudden movement even blowing away the handkerchief covering my face. Opening my eyes wide, I asked with genuine interested amusement. So then, how did Qianxue react after reading this precious letter from her beloved? According to detailed reports from our people stationed there observing, Miss Bai pressed the letter tightly to her chest for an extremely long time after reading it multiple times, smiling foolishly the entire while like someone intoxicated or drugged. This morning, facing her usual cold, completely unappetizing porridge, she's apparently no longer picky or complaining at all. She eats very carefully and gratefully, savoring every single bite as though it were a palace delicacy. Chen Ziming paused, genuinely puzzled by this behavior. Miss, do you think the master mixed some kind of powerful drug into his ink that can make people willingly embrace terrible suffering? I considered this seriously for a moment. I don't know if Ziming's ink contains any drugs or magic properties. I only know with absolute certainty that Qianxue is severely sick mentally, and not lightly afflicted either. A man with absolutely no real, concrete actions to actually help her situation, offering only empty, meaningless words and promises, yet she treats these complete illusions like precious medicine, determined to feed herself exclusively on fantasized love. She'll definitely end up starving to death eventually from this delusion. Mother-in-law had gone to the mountain temple for half a month of intensive prayers and meditation, returning to the household just before her son's official appointment ceremony. Ziming and I went together formally to pay our proper respects in her quarters. First, mother and son warmly greeted each other with obvious deep affection. Then mother-in-law slowly fiddled with her prayer beads, turning deliberately to regard me with distinctly cold, disapproving eyes. I heard that recently whenever Ziming visits the rear courtyard residential quarters, he only ever goes exclusively to your room and nowhere else. You've been married 3 full months now with absolutely no signs of pregnancy in your belly, yet you shamelessly monopolize the man entirely for yourself. As the legitimate wife responsible for family continuity, How can you possibly be so narrow-minded, jealous, and selfishly greedy about sharing your husband's attention with others? She was clearly seeking justice for her beloved cousin's daughter, the girl she'd always considered her destined daughter-in-law. After all, she'd regarded Qianxue as her future daughter-in-law since the girl's birth according to family arrangements, a bond naturally incomparable to an outsider like me who'd only recently married into the family through political convenience. Ziming sat rigidly beside his mother in the seat of honor, holding his teacup and pretending to drink with exaggerated, intense concentration, practically wishing he could openly declare that he frequently visited Qianxue's quarters in deliberate secret defiance of my jealous authority. I wasn't remotely angry at the accusation, instead bowing respectfully to admit fault with appropriate humility and proper daughter-in-law deference. This daughter-in-law wasn't sufficiently thoughtful or considerate of family needs. I humbly apologize for my shortcomings. Mother-in-law appeared quite satisfied with my immediate obedience and submission, the corners of her thin mouth revealing a small, triumphant smile. Then you understand perfectly what you must do to correct this unacceptable situation. Daughter-in-law understands perfectly, mother. I'll take appropriate action immediately. Ziming was still staring fixedly upward at the ceiling beams, drinking his tea with exaggerated focus, but now involuntarily paused mid-sip, his entire body tensing visibly. He finally lowered his cup slowly toward me in a silent gesture that might have been acknowledgement or warning, his eyes questioning. What could I possibly do except fulfill his unspoken expectations magnificently? I smiled with serene, innocent lightness, waving gracefully toward the door. Husband's inner courtyard has been terribly empty and lonely recently. Besides myself, there's only Sister Bai who continuously lacks husband's proper favor and attention through no fault of her own. So I specifically located and purchased a kind-hearted, exceptionally beautiful young woman of good character, hoping she might help husband pass his time more pleasantly and provide him with truly enjoyable companionship and entertainment. During this casual announcement delivered in my sweetest voice, a stunning beauty with an exceptionally graceful, seductive figure entered shyly through the door, bowing politely to greet everyone present with downcast eyes and perfectly flushed cheeks that enhanced her appeal. Mother-in-law violently slammed her prayer beads onto the solid wooden table with a sharp, angry crack, grinding her teeth audibly in barely suppressed fury. But before she could formulate her objection and speak harsh words, I interrupted smoothly with an expression of innocent, confused alarm, patting my chest fearfully. Did this daughter-in-law do something terribly wrong? Please instruct me clearly, honored mother, so I may immediately correct my grievous errors and learn proper behavior. Ziming quickly answered for his momentarily speechless mother, his words formally praising me while his hungry, lustful eyes devoured the newcomer's beauty. You did absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever, Wanying. Your thoughtful action demonstrates exceptional virtue and proper wifely consideration for family harmony. His mouth mechanically recited the socially expected praise, but his greedy gaze couldn't tear itself away from the beauty's flower-like smile and extremely seductive figure for even a single moment, drinking in every detail. I laughed coldly inside my chest with grim satisfaction. Indeed, this is Liu Mingzhu, the woman who completely fascinated and sexually obsessed Ziming in my previous life to the point of neglecting all duties. In that timeline, Mingzhu had entered Ziming's household under very different, far less respectable circumstances. Back then she'd been a famous, expensive courtesan from the pleasure quarters who'd been thoroughly enjoyed by thousands of different men over years, later gifted to Ziming by a minor official as a calculated bribe to curry favor and buy influence. In this life, I'd acted first with deliberate strategy, locating her early through careful investigation and purchasing her contract at an extraordinarily high price before anyone else could. I'd found her as a talented singer and dancer just about to auction her virginity to the highest bidder in a public ceremony. By rescuing her from that utterly degrading fate and arranging her placement as the Marquis's honored concubine instead, she was naturally overwhelmed with sincere gratitude toward me as her savior and benefactor. Moreover, Mingzhu genuinely hadn't expected the Marquis to be so remarkably young, powerful, and devastatingly handsome in person. She smiled even more brilliantly and seductively at him, making Ziming completely unable to resist the temptation. He immediately reached out to embrace her slender waist possessively. He hurriedly bid farewell to his mother with barely concealed eagerness, clearly desperate to depart immediately. Mother-in-law's chest heaved with even more violent agitation, but her mouth couldn't formulate any valid objection to stop me or criticize my actions. After all, I'd done exactly what she demanded, provided my husband with more women. I also rose politely to follow them toward the door to take my leave. Only then did Ziming suddenly notice my presence beside them, as though awakening from an erotic dream. His face showed momentary panic and guilty confusion. Wanying, I've only just taken up my new official position and will surely be extremely busy with completely unfamiliar responsibilities for quite some time. I'm afraid I cannot come to your chambers as regularly as before. When I have free time available, I'll certainly come find you then. I gently, deliberately touched my still flat belly, smiling with serene contentment and secret knowledge. No need to come find me anymore at all, husband. I'm already carrying your child. What do I possibly need you for now? I was pregnant. Besides a few extremely close, carefully trusted people, outsiders had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever. In my previous life's horrific difficult birth, I couldn't stop obsessively thinking about the specific circumstances and exact details. The midwife had clearly stated multiple times the baby's position was completely normal, not excessively large at all, everything appeared medically perfect. So why the agonizing, ultimately fatal difficult delivery that killed us both? What had gone so catastrophically, impossibly wrong? This time I absolutely had to exercise extreme, meticulous caution about absolutely everything touching my body or entering my chambers. Fortunately, Ziming was utterly bewitched and completely consumed by Mingzhu's practiced sexual charms and bedroom skills, no longer bothering me at all or demanding his husbandly rights, allowing me to peacefully nurture this precious pregnancy in safety and relative isolation. Mingzhu had spent many years skillfully navigating the competitive red light districts and elite pleasure quarters. With the experienced madam's careful, extremely explicit instruction in countless techniques, she knew hundreds of exotic bedroom positions and sexual practices. Absolutely no man could possibly escape her practiced seductions and skillful manipulations once she set her sights on them. Ziming's official position kept him only minimally occupied with actual duties and real responsibilities. Returning early from the palace each day after performing the bare minimum, he would immediately rush directly to Mingzhu's luxurious chambers like a man utterly possessed by demons. If he had any unfinished paperwork or minor tasks remaining, he'd summon Mingzhu directly to his study to serve him sexually there while supposedly working. Changing environments and locations apparently made their intimate activities even more thrilling and exciting for him, adding novelty and risk. For a considerable time, Mingzhu's reputation, favor, and influence seemed absolutely limitless and completely unassailable throughout the household. I could sit peacefully undisturbed in my quarters, resting comfortably and carefully protecting my developing child with proper nutrition and minimal stress. But someone else absolutely could not tolerate this new situation. Qianxue, utterly forgotten and completely pushed to the back of Ziming's distracted, sex-obsessed mind, suffered even more acutely than during her previous isolation. Her suffering wasn't primarily because her physical conditions had actually worsened significantly in concrete ways. Rather, it stemmed from overwhelming, consuming fear that her supposedly devoted beloved was genuinely changing his heart and permanently transferring his affections to another woman, forgetting their childhood bond entirely. So she desperately used her own blood to dye expensive silk thread vivid red, embroidering 2 meaningful lines of romantic poetry on an expensive handkerchief throughout multiple long nights by dim candlelight, having her loyal personal maid Xiaomai deliver this heartfelt creation directly to Ziming as a poignant reminder of their supposedly eternal bond and shared history. Coincidentally, Ziming was beginning to find Mingzhu's charms slightly less novel and exciting after months of constant, excessive indulgence in her body. Seeing Qianxue's blood-stained handkerchief stirred some faint remnants of past tender feelings buried beneath his current obsession, so he went to her humble quarters for several consecutive days, gracing her with his presence and attention. Mingzhu immediately performed calculated jealous tantrums with practiced cuteness and perfect timing. Ziming, desperate to comfort and appease his current favorite, rewarded her with expensive gifts like flowing water, an endless stream of valuable presents arriving daily. Rare glass hairpins imported from distant foreign lands, precious brocade fabrics in stunning, vibrant colors, fresh venison from his personal hunting expeditions, exotic fruits. Besides my obligatory portion as legitimate wife that couldn't be denied, absolutely everything valuable went directly to Mingzhu's grasping, greedy hands. On the contrary, Qianxue's laborious devoted service and attention received absolutely nothing tangible in return, not even acknowledgement. She didn't complain outwardly to anyone, though. She continued faithfully serving Ziming each morning, helping him dress with her own delicate hands, gazing at him with worshipful adoration as though he were a deity. I have Brother Ziming's heart and true love residing within me. That's more than enough for me to survive. How could those worldly, material things possibly compare to our profound feelings for each other forged over years? Ziming was extremely moved by this seemingly noble sentiment, kissing her tenderly and repeatedly all over her face. Only you truly understand me and my heart completely, my precious one. You're the only woman who really knows my soul. In the very next breath after this touching declaration, he gifted an exquisite, expensive mercury mirror presented by foreign envoys to both Mingzhu's room and to my quarters. I observed this pattern with grim satisfaction and cold clarity. You see the truth quite clearly now if you just watch actions instead of listening to empty words. He knows perfectly well how to genuinely love someone and demonstrate that love with concrete, meaningful actions and valuable gifts. He simply doesn't want to show that love to Qianxue. So is this love that exists only in spoken words and empty promises really true love at all? Or just comfortable, self-serving delusion? Under my careful arrangement and deliberate manipulation, Mingzhu learned through seemingly accidental household gossip that Ziming was secretly visiting Qianxue regularly again. Feeling genuinely threatened and deeply uneasy about losing her favored position, when I returned from attending a tedious social banquet, I was urgently summoned and invited to Mingzhu's elaborately decorated courtyard to witness something supposedly important. The woman stood completely soaked and violently shivering, hastily wrapped in a thick cotton blanket, her trembling finger pointing dramatically and accusingly at Qianxue while crying and complaining with perfect theatrical timing. Mistress, it was definitely her who deliberately pushed me violently into the freezing pond without any provocation. My personal maid witnessed absolutely everything and can testify truthfully under oath. She must be insanely jealous of my favor with the master. So while Madam wasn't home to supervise and protect, she wanted to harm me severely, possibly even kill me and my unborn child. Mingzhu lowered her head, crying with pitiful, delicate sobs specifically calculated to move any heart to immediate sympathy and protective rage. I glanced over the chaotic scene with apparent deep concern and alarm. What a terrible mess this is. Quickly have the maids escort Sister Mingzhu inside immediately to change into completely dry clothes. Allowing her to stand here soaking wet like this in winter? Are you trying to harm her body and health even further? Mingzhu continued sobbing pathetically, her entire body shaking. I don't want to harm my health either, truly I don't. I just desperately want the master and madam to see clearly, to truly understand how absolutely vicious and evil this woman really is beneath her false innocent appearance. Only after this dramatic declaration delivered with perfect emotion did she finally allow maids to surround and support her carefully, helping her turn into the warm bedroom to change clothing properly and be tended. I shifted my considering gaze toward Ziming sitting rigidly in the main seat of honor. He gripped a folding fan tightly enough his knuckles showed white, his facial expression constantly changing and shifting through various emotions, clearly lost in troubled thoughts and rapid calculations. Master, what is your considered judgment on this serious matter? He startled slightly back to immediate awareness, took a deep, steadying breath to calm himself, then directed his question toward the woman kneeling submissively and fearfully below. Qianxue, do you have anything to say in your defense against this serious accusation? Qianxue, clearly dazed and utterly shocked from being accused so publicly and harshly of attempted murder, blankly opened her mouth several times before any words could emerge at all. I absolutely didn't do it. I didn't push her. I have no idea why Sister Mingzhu makes such terrible, false accusations against me. I desperately hope Brother Ziming will investigate this matter clearly and discover the actual truth. Seeing the prominent veins bulging on Ziming's forehead, visibly throbbing with suppressed rage and extreme frustration at being put in this impossible position, I waited silently to observe. After an extremely long, unbearably tense silence stretching on, he finally spoke through tightly gritted teeth, his jaw clenched. So you cannot provide any concrete evidence whatsoever proving you didn't push Mingzhu into the pond as she claims? She falsely accuses me like this without any real proof herself. I genuinely don't know what I can possibly say to defend myself effectively or what evidence I could even provide. Looking at Qianxue rendered utterly speechless and helpless by the impossible situation, Ziming couldn't prevent himself from taking another deep, frustrated breath. Just at that critical moment, another woman suddenly knelt decisively beside Qianxue, pressing her forehead to the floor in supplication. It was her stubbornly loyal personal maid, Xiaomai. Miss Liu deliberately sent me away on a completely fabricated errand, leaving only Miss Bai alone and isolated at the pond with no witnesses. What the actual situation and exact circumstances were at that crucial moment, besides the 3 people directly involved in the incident, absolutely no one else knows the truth. Master, you know Miss Bai's gentle character intimately from childhood. She never fights or competes aggressively for anything. Why would she suddenly risk absolutely everything to harm Miss Liu so brazenly in public? In my humble view, I'm afraid Miss Liu jumped into the pond deliberately herself, then had her maid provide completely false testimony, thus cleverly framing Miss Bai for a serious crime she didn't actually commit. Xiaomai raised her head boldly, her eyes blazing with righteous conviction and loyalty. Master, please don't just listen to one side's convenient story and convict someone without any proper investigation of actual fact. Clear thinking, impressively sharp tongue, a mere maid demonstrating such remarkable courage and intelligent schemes. I regarded Xiaomai directly and carefully for perhaps the first time, genuinely seeing her as an individual. Qianxue nodded frantically in desperate agreement, clinging to this defense as her only hope. These passionate, logical words struck directly at Ziming's sorest point, his deepest vulnerability and greatest fear. He responded with forced, careful softness, trying to appear reasonable. I know intimately what kind of person Qianxue truly is deep in her heart from our years together. She would never do such malicious, violent things to deliberately harm others. According to your reasoning, Miss Liu using such a bitter trick against herself isn't completely impossible to imagine. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Mingzhu abruptly lifted the bedroom curtain and rushed out angrily, her eyes blazing with fury and tears. She charged directly to Ziming, seizing his hand forcefully and placing it firmly on her still flat lower belly with dramatic urgency. I'm already carrying your child, our precious baby. How could I possibly risk the master's own flesh and blood, his heir, for some petty revenge scheme? Use your mind. Think logically. Qianxue was immediately seized and dragged away forcibly while being ordered confined to her quarters indefinitely as punishment. Even while being physically removed from the room by rough servants, she continued muttering desperately through tears. Brother Ziming, you absolutely must believe me. I'm completely innocent of this crime. Please investigate properly. Don't abandon me. In my previous life, there had been an almost identical scene playing out at this exact point. Only in that timeline, I had immediately intervened to help her, spending enormous personal effort investigating the matter thoroughly over weeks, eventually returning Qianxue's innocence and freedom to her publicly. But this time, I had absolutely no plan to involve myself whatsoever in their petty drama. Isn't remaining idle and uninvolved perfectly pleasant? I could simply observe and enjoy watching the show unfold naturally. Only Chunhua, who naturally liked investigating mysteries and getting to the bottom of confusing things, occasionally muttered complaints and detailed reports in my ear about the ongoing situation and latest developments. The master secretly went to see Miss Bai again last night under cover of darkness. The two of them embraced tightly together in her cold room. One kept muttering about time eventually proving her complete innocence, insisting repeatedly he was protecting her through this ordeal. The other was moved to grateful tears, saying she always knew deep down he believed her. Chunhua shook her head with genuine incomprehension. Clearly the master personally ordered Miss Bai's harsh confinement as punishment. Yet he still behaves like that, sneaking around playing these games. Rather than wasting precious time on such pointless theatrical performances, why doesn't he quickly send people to properly investigate the actual truth and clear her name publicly? Hearing this, I shook my head slowly, my expression filled with contempt and deep pity. A man who cannot even openly protect his own supposed beloved woman, Can he still legitimately be called a man at all? He fears my mother's family power and extensive political influence at every turn. He fears Mingzhu's potential dirty tricks and dangerous schemes. So he completely abandoned his supposed beloved to public accusation, smearing her reputation without offering even the smallest measure of respect or defense. Yet he foolishly thinks he's cleverly protecting their precious love, unwilling to be open and honest about his actual feelings. Living like this, hiding and scheming, I'm afraid he can only successfully fool the stupid, willfully blind Qianxue. Or rather, precisely because Qianxue willingly makes herself blind for his sake, deliberately ignoring obvious evidence, he dares treat her like a disposable toy to trample and abuse at will whenever convenient. After I died in my previous life, he immediately elevated Qianxue without any hesitation or delay whatsoever. So clearly he remains completely immersed in his self-righteous, delusional fantasy of deep, sacrificial affection. Women become mere tools and symbols to display and prove his supposed true love to himself. How utterly pathetic. Chunhua considered this carefully, then asked with lingering genuine doubt. But honestly, Miss, looking objectively at Miss Bai's genuinely weak, fragile appearance and gentle nature, she really doesn't seem like someone who would commit such bold, violent acts. Could it truly be Miss Liu directing and acting this entire elaborate performance herself? I turned another page of my account book, eyes never lifting from the detailed text and neat columns. Seeking substantial wealth through accepting significant danger and risk, isn't that the eternal truth of advancement? Chunhua moved even closer, lowering her voice to an anxious whisper. So then, Miss Liu really is pregnant as she loudly claims? Her tone conveyed clear worry about potential threats. Miss, aren't you afraid at all of this development? Afraid of what exactly? She cannot possibly give birth to that child anyway. It's already doomed. In my previous life, Mingzhu had also once carried a pregnancy to several months, but having consumed excessive, dangerous amounts of contraceptive medicines and harsh abortive herbs throughout her many years working in the brothels since early youth, her body and womb were thoroughly ruined beyond any hope of repair. The baby developing in her damaged belly couldn't survive for long before transforming into a pool of blood and dead tissue, flowing out painfully in a devastating miscarriage. Moreover, even if by some completely miraculous fortune she actually managed to carry to full term and give birth successfully to a living child, it would merely be a concubine's child, completely incapable of threatening the position and secure inheritance rights of the legitimate heir currently growing safely in my own protected belly. Ziming visited Qianxue's confinement perhaps twice more over the following weeks, then abruptly stopped going altogether without explanation. He also significantly reduced his visits to Mingzhu's quarters, no longer spending every available moment with her. Perhaps because of her claimed pregnancy, he couldn't freely engage in their previous extremely vigorous, athletic bedroom activities anymore, which rapidly diminished his interest and enthusiasm. Later, servants from the front courtyard reported with knowing smiles that recently Ziming frequently went to the pleasure quarters and entertainment districts with his new official colleagues, clearly finding new diversions, conquests, and sexual outlets there. I never advised against this behavior or attempted to restrict his movements in any way. Why should I possibly care where he scattered his increasingly divided attentions? Mother-in-law grew absolutely furious again about something, probably my introduction of Mingzhu, and returned to the mountain temple for another extended period of intensive prayers. Plus, winter was rapidly approaching with harsh weather and countless household management matters requiring constant attention and firm decisions. I was extraordinarily busy with expanding responsibilities. So busy, in fact, that I had absolutely no time or spare energy to pay any attention whatsoever to Qianxue's suffering in her isolated confinement. The servants originally assigned to her remote courtyard had all been systematically reassigned to other duties throughout the household since her confinement began. The remote, neglected bamboo garden now contained only Qianxue and Xiaomai, just two people completely isolated from the rest of the household. Everything had to be accomplished entirely by their own hands alone, not to mention they faced severe, deliberate shortages of adequate food, warm clothing, heating charcoal, and firewood for cooking. The two mistress and servant spent their increasingly desperate days hungry and bitterly cold, struggling with endless physical labor just to survive each harsh day. I simply pretended complete ignorance of their terrible suffering. But even enduring such genuinely harsh conditions that would break most people, Qianxue still stubbornly didn't think to investigate the pond incident truth herself to clear her own name and grievances publicly. Like red spider lilies blooming in perpetual darkness, she remained pathetically hoping her true love would ultimately rescue her from this unbearable misery. Later, the two truly couldn't bear the severe deprivation anymore. Just exactly like in my previous life's timeline, they began desperately embroidering handkerchiefs day and night by dim, flickering candlelight, hoping to secretly sell these items outside the household for silver coins to improve their desperate situation somewhat with food and fuel. But without me secretly arranging to purchase them at artificially inflated prices far above market value, their mediocre, crooked embroidery work produced by hands swollen grotesquely red, stiff, and clumsy from constant cold basically couldn't sell for any reasonable amount at all. They struggled completely in vain, accomplishing nothing, wasting precious time and energy. Finally, because of critically insufficient heating charcoal, multiple broken windows letting in icy drafts, plus the bamboo garden being located in such a remote, perpetually damp, dark place far from the main house, both mistress and servant soon developed severe, crippling rheumatism in all their joints. They couldn't sleep properly night after night, their agonized groans of constant pain echoing through the cold darkness, unheard. I genuinely wondered if Ziming even knew or cared about their suffering at all anymore. Now thinking back with perfect clarity, in my previous life Ziming had brutally tortured Qianxue to demonstrate false loyalty to me, relying entirely and absolutely on my support from behind. After I helped her that first time, he clearly understood my kind heart definitely wouldn't allow his supposed beloved to suffer too excessively or too long under such harsh conditions. But without me intervening and supporting her, would he really reduce her suffering at all on his own initiative? I'm absolutely certain he would not. He's fundamentally incapable of actually protecting anyone, even someone he repeatedly claims to love above all others in the world. Not long after this realization, Mingzhu suddenly came to find me with an unexpected, surprising request. She knelt formally in my elegant reception hall, her voice trembling with apparent earnest sincerity. Being rescued by Madame from my lowly, utterly degrading status in the pleasure quarters, this child growing in my belly naturally belongs to Madame as well, not merely to me personally. Coming from such humble, shameful origins as I do, keeping the baby by my side to raise personally after birth, I genuinely fear corrupting their character and tainting the Marquis's noble bloodline with my inferior, polluted background. She bowed her head even lower in supplication. I sincerely hope that after this child is born, I may bring them directly to be raised under your personal care and guidance as legitimate. I humbly beg Madam to grant this respectful request and accept my baby. I gently set down my delicate porcelain teacup, my pleasant smile completely unchanged. Since the child is already growing in your belly naturally, they clearly have destined fate with you personally. How could I possibly take away what you love and cruelly separate mother from child? That would be inhumane. Just peacefully nurture your pregnancy carefully with proper nutrition. Everything will be fine. Madam, but I. Mingzhu desperately wanted to say something more, plead further for this arrangement, but was smoothly cut off by Chuanhua's timely intervention. Miss Liu, Madam has only just taken over managing all the household shops and extensive agricultural properties. She's extremely tired from these new responsibilities and needs proper rest now. Perhaps you should return to your quarters. Hearing this clear, firm dismissal, Mingzhu stopped speaking immediately. Understanding clearly that continuing to plead might actually displease me significantly and permanently damage her carefully cultivated position, she forced a weak, disappointed smile, bowed respectfully, and departed quietly. Watching her leave in visible distress and confusion, Chunhua was genuinely puzzled by the entire strange exchange. Miss Liu is far too timid and anxious about everything. The child isn't even born yet, barely showing, and she's already terrified she cannot teach them well or provide proper guidance in the future. Why worry so prematurely about problems that may never occur? I sighed softly, my expression knowing and slightly sad. It's also a mother's natural heart and protective instinct for her child's future welfare. Mingzhu was simultaneously seeking a powerful umbrella of protection for herself and wanting to secure a genuinely bright future for her unborn child. She didn't know I was already pregnant myself with the heir. If I had agreed to her proposal, I would naturally be obligated to protect her through safe delivery as insurance for obtaining the baby. When this child was formally brought under my official name as legitimate heir, raised directly by the mistress of the household according to law, growing up they would command infinitely more respect, opportunities, and social standing outside in society. Chen Ziming softly muttered under her breath, her voice carrying a distinctly pouting tone. I don't understand what she's so desperately afraid of in the first place. The master clearly dotes on her extravagantly and excessively. Just look at that enormous night-glowing pearl adorning her elaborate hair. The brilliantly gleaming golden-green silk bracelet circling her delicate wrist. Not to mention the extraordinarily expensive brocade clothes covering her entire body. One single piece of that fabric costs 1,000 taels of silver. I observe her dressing no worse than any cherished young miss from the most prestigious noble families. Before this girl could finish her envious commentary, Nanny Shen, the experienced palace servant my sister had personally sent to assist me, suddenly spoke with unusual urgent gravity. Madam, you must avoid all close contact with her from now on. Keep significant physical distance at all times. I looked sharply at her intensely serious gaze and immediately realized something was terribly, dangerously wrong with life-threatening implications. My heart began racing with sudden fear. Why? What's wrong? Tell me immediately. Nanny Shen nodded gravely, her weathered face creased with deep concern. The sachet she wears so prominently contains sweet flaggrass among the fragrant herbs. Sweet flaggrass originates from the remote southwestern Miao tribal regions. It produces a fresh, pleasant fragrance that seems completely harmless and attractive. But it extremely aggressively promotes blood circulation. If pregnant women smell this potent herb for extended periods repeatedly, they will either miscarry spontaneously or suffer absolutely catastrophic difficult childbirth resulting in death. She paused, her voice dropping even lower with grim memory. When I personally served Consort Shun in the palace many years ago, I once witnessed this exact thing being used maliciously by rivals. The results were absolutely devastating and horrific. Both mother and child died in agony. Her later words, I could no longer hear clearly through the roaring in my ears. My entire body trembled violently with sudden cold comprehension, my mind buzzing chaotically with fragmented memories and terrible realization. Sachet. Sweet flag grass that promotes blood circulation. Catastrophic difficult childbirth. Death. In my previous life, Ziming had once personally presented me with an exquisitely embroidered sachet as a supposedly loving gift. The fragrance had been precisely like what currently emanated from Mingzhu's accessories hanging from her belt. He'd said it was a personal token of his deepest affection, gifted to me lovingly, hoping I would never forget his profound feelings for me. So I had worn it faithfully day and night without question, never once removing it from my person, keeping it pressed close to my body constantly throughout my pregnancy. But unexpectedly, there had been lethal, calculated tricks hidden inside that beautiful, fragrant gift. Nanny Shen and Chen Ziming, seeing I wasn't well, my face drained completely of all color, quickly moved to support my swaying body on both sides with strong arms. This old servant spoke too much and too carelessly. I've frightened Madam terribly. Please forgive this servant's thoughtlessness. Miss, you don't have that dangerous sachet anymore. You're completely safe. Miss, please don't be afraid. Everything is fine now. I tightly grasped both their hands desperately, my lips trembling speechlessly, unable to form coherent words. 2 streams of hot tears flowed continuously down my pale, cold cheeks. Overwhelming hatred and murderous rage enveloped my entire being, threatening to consume me completely. So my agonizing death in the previous life wasn't natural complications or unavoidable medical difficulty at all. It had been deliberately caused by someone else's careful, calculated malicious intent over months. It was my own husband who killed me without mercy. It was my own child's father who personally, deliberately murdered both of us in cold blood for his convenience. I had once foolishly thought he was merely thoughtless and selfish, caring more for his beloved concubine than his legitimate wife and unborn child. But unexpectedly, he was infinitely more cruel and monstrously vicious than I'd ever imagined possible. He's not a man at all. He's a demon wearing convincing human skin. After resting and recovering for several days, Forcing myself to eat and regain physical strength despite having no appetite, my heart became incomparably calm and cold, like ancient ice that would never melt. Though reborn with full knowledge of my previous life, I had initially hated Ziming for playing with my feelings and deceiving me so completely, but I'd never actually considered taking his life in direct revenge. I had only wanted him to live uncomfortably, to suffer and struggle without my essential support, to fail and be forgotten. But now everything seemed devastatingly, crystal clear. This person absolutely cannot be allowed to continue living and breathing. He's far too dangerous to me and my child. Just at that critical moment of final decision, a new person suddenly appeared prominently in the manor's daily operations. Originally Qianxue's most loyal maid, Xiaomai had apparently decided she wasn't willing to continue suffering endless privation and misery alongside her mistress any longer. She successfully bribed the guards with carefully saved silver, secretly escaped from the locked bamboo garden under cover of darkness, and dramatically hung herself from the ceiling beam in Ziming's bed one night, positioning herself as a desperate damsel in distress requiring immediate rescue. She possessed naturally beautiful, delicate features and demonstrated exceptional skill at acting docile, helpless, and emotionally touching with perfect tears. Ziming naturally didn't refuse this unexpected gift, literally falling into his bed. Thus, the remote bamboo garden was left with only Qianxue remaining, completely alone and utterly abandoned even by her most loyal servant. She waited in her freezing room, surrounded by mountains of unwashed dirty clothes and rotting garbage, existing in absolute misery, desperately expecting Xiaomai to return at any moment with help or supplies. She didn't know that Xiaomai, who had once willingly worked like a loyal horse for her, serving her devotedly through everything, would never, ever return to that place of suffering. When I finally decided to visit personally, I found Qianxue propping her chin with one trembling, skeletal hand, sitting in the single small patch of weak sunlight in the overgrown, neglected courtyard, staring blankly at the empty sky above with dead eyes, still wearing her signature white clothes despite everything. No wonder Xiaomai had cried and complained that every single day brought endless clothes to wash and clean. In a broken-down courtyard without any servants or proper facilities, certain tasks absolutely must be done personally with your own hands. Normal colored clothes get dirty easily enough, let alone maintaining pristine white garments in such conditions. It had been truly unbearably hard on Xiaomai. Qianxue heard movement behind her but didn't bother turning around, apparently expecting it was Xiaomai finally returning from some errand. "Xiaomai, you're finally back. I was beginning to worry something terrible had happened to you. There's no Xiaomai in this manor anymore. Only Sister Xiaomai now, enjoying a completely different, comfortable life serving the master." Qianxue absolutely hadn't expected it would be me standing there behind her. Startled badly, she turned around jerkily, her eyes widening in shock and confusion for a long moment before she managed to stand with great difficulty and attempt a respectful bow. But her movements were painfully slow and stiff, joints clearly suffering from severe rheumatism pain. "Madam, what are you saying? I don't understand at all what you mean." By this point, Chunhua had efficiently brought a comfortable chair for me. She carefully arranged soft, thick cushions before gently helping me sit in proper comfort. Only then did I speak with deliberate, calm cruelty. "Sister Qianxue doesn't understand why we suddenly have another new Sister Xiaomai in the household serving master." She stepped backward several small, unsteady steps, unable to believe what she was hearing, muttering softly in complete denial. "Impossible. This cannot possibly be true. How can this be happening? She clearly told me she would rather die than betray me, that she was utterly loyal. How could she possibly abandon me like this?" She trailed off, then continued more frantically. "Besides, Brother Ziming loves me so profoundly, so completely above all others. How could he possibly accept someone who was my personal servant into his bed? There must be something wrong here. Something is definitely wrong somewhere." I smiled softly, almost gently, like explaining to a confused child. What could possibly be wrong? A man has natural desires and needs. A woman has willing intentions and availability. Naturally they make a good, suitable match. Nothing wrong at all. Life continues. No, absolutely impossible. Qianxue shook her head violently, frantically in denial. "Brother Ziming loves me so much, cherishes me so deeply beyond measure. He would never, could never treat me like this, never betray our sacred bond. He told me himself, with his own mouth, heaven never ages, true love is eternal and unchanging. Hearts intertwined like silk threads, bound together in thousands of complicated knots. We truly love each other. Our feelings are completely real. She held back tears with obvious desperate effort, shouting her rebuttal defensively, her expression wild and crazed with desperate denial and breaking sanity. I wasn't remotely angry at her outburst. But Chen Hua couldn't tolerate it at all, her patience finally breaking. She carefully adjusted the luxurious snow fox fur cloak draped warmly around my shoulders, added more glowing charcoal to my portable brazier to ensure my comfort, then rolled her eyes with open, harsh mockery directed at Qianxue. Right, absolutely right. Your precious brother Ziming loves you most in the entire world, more than anyone else. Loves you so incredibly much he places you in the most broken, miserable place in the entire extensive manor. Loves you so profoundly he confines you to quarters and forces you to eat disgusting leftover food scraped from others' plates. Loves you so deeply he flutters around like a shameless butterfly everywhere, eating luxurious food and drinking fine wine daily, but never once remembers his former childhood sweetheart fiancée suffering alone in the cold. Chuanhua's voice dripped with biting sarcasm. So this is what you call love? Then our miss absolutely cannot allow the master to love her even a tiny bit. After all, our miss still wants to enjoy all the wealth, glory, comfort, and respect she rightfully deserves as a human being. Qianxue's tears finally fell freely, streaming down her hollow, gaunt cheeks as she sobbed in weak, pathetic protest. What do you possibly know about anything? What can a servant understand? He behaves this way because he sees your miss has an empress sister with immense power and doesn't dare offend her influential family. It's political necessity, not lack of genuine love. He's protecting our love. Chen Hua nodded with exaggerated, mocking understanding. Oh, I see everything clearly now. Our miss has an empress sister with great power, that's completely true. Does Miss Liu have imperial connections? Does Sister Xiaomai have powerful family backing? Their food and dress and treatment are no worse than our Miss's luxurious lifestyle and jewels. Only you live infinitely worse than the lowliest beggar servant in this entire household, yet you still feel deeply touched and grateful for scraps. She leaned forward, her voice hardening with contempt. You've already been trampled completely into the mud by him, ground down into absolute nothing worthless. Yet you still eagerly lick his shoe soles while saying thank you for the grace of your attention, master. I think you're 1,000 times more stupid than the fool begging on the street corner who at least knows his true position. Seeing Chuanhua's words becoming excessively harsh and cruel, potentially damaging future usefulness, I spoke calmly to stop her, ordering her to withdraw outside and wait. Qianxue, thrown into complete shock by these brutal revelations, slowly came back to her senses after a very long silence, finally collapsing onto the cold ground, crying with utterly pitiful, broken sounds that barely sounded human. I stood up slowly, approaching to look down at her nearly destroyed state with cold, calculating eyes that saw potential usefulness. That's right. I even discovered something you would surely be intensely interested to know. She blankly raised her head to look up at me with dead eyes, her expression completely empty of hope or fight. Previously, when Governor Bai was convicted of serious treason and corruption and your entire extended family was destroyed, the single most crucial piece of evidence was secretly, anonymously presented to the emperor by none other than the Chen household itself. She stared at me, her expression frozen in absolute horror and disbelief, her world visibly shattering. No, that's impossible. How could Brother Ziming possibly betray me like that? How could he deliberately destroy my entire family? We clearly loved each other since childhood. I interrupted her coldly, deliberately, raising my head to gaze at the empty sky. Why not kick you when you're already completely down and helpless? He could simultaneously marry into the Empress's powerful mother's family for political advancement, then magnanimously pretend charitable kindness by taking you in afterward as a pitiful refugee showing his mercy. Having both a well-connected virtuous wife and a grateful beautiful concubine available, plus destroying a potential rival family, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Isn't that absolutely wonderful and brilliantly clever? After speaking with brutal, crushing finality, I turned to leave her there in her misery. But suddenly I heard a sickening thud behind me. Qianxue had deliberately knocked her head extremely hard against the ground, then shakily propped herself up, crawling forward desperately to kneel directly at my feet in absolute supplication. Blood mixed with tears and dirt slowly flowed down her battered, destroyed face. Her eyes were completely red, dazed, tragically desperate, as she laughed with horrible, bitter, breaking misery. "Madam, please have mercy on me. Please, I'm desperately begging you. I'm already 4 months pregnant with his child." Seeing my belly gradually growing more prominent and obvious, showing clear signs of pregnancy, I knew I absolutely couldn't hide this condition much longer from general household knowledge, so I took initiative to inform Ziming directly and privately. Hearing I was carrying his child, his very first instinctive reaction was visible shock and dismay, not joy. Then the corners of his mouth forced an unconvincing, strained smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. This is indeed excellent, wonderful news. Congratulations to us both." I pretended with perfect acting not to notice the deep worry and rapid calculation in his constantly shifting eyes, instead gently caressing my small but definite belly, smiling with genuine maternal contentment. Mother has always constantly urged us, desperately wanting a grandson to continue the family line. Now we finally have one growing here. She'll be so incredibly happy when she learns. Hearing me confidently say grandson with such certainty about the child's gender, his eyebrows twitched again involuntarily, revealing his thoughts. He clearly didn't want the prestigious Chen household and noble title eventually falling into the hands of a child not born from the woman he actually loved. The thought must have been eating him alive inside with frustration. How does Wanying know so certainly it's a boy and not a daughter? Whether boy or girl, I'll love this child equally and appropriately. I smiled serenely, knowingly. I think exactly the same way, husband. Any child is a blessing. Knowing he couldn't refuse or object to my pregnancy without appearing absolutely monstrous and suspicious, he had no choice but to agree and make appropriate supportive sounds and gestures. I returned to my mother's home to be cared for properly by mother, my sister, and experienced servants, finally breathing a profound sigh of relief, officially entering a peaceful, protected pregnancy nurturing period under their loving, careful watch and the palace nanny's expert guidance. While my situation enjoyed calm seas and clear skies with every comfort, the Chen household experienced waves constantly rising before previous ones could fully settle. Before leaving the manor, I'd used the convenient excuse that Ziming lacked sufficient people to properly care for him and his needs, and officially released Qianxue from her unjust confinement with full restoration of privileges. Ziming naturally agreed immediately to this arrangement without objection. Long separation breeds renewed passion, as the old saying goes. Plus, Qianxue deliberately flattered him with practiced skill and desperate intensity, using every technique she knew. The two lived inseparably for a considerable period, making up enthusiastically for lost time and rekindling old feelings. Qianxue no longer stubbornly wore exclusively white clothing anymore to mourn her destroyed family. Pale yellow, light blue, powder pink, dream red, whatever colors appeared bright and cheerful and attractive, she wore them enthusiastically with genuine joy. Using the expensive cosmetics I'd deliberately provided her through servants, she dressed herself gorgeously and seductively, making Ziming's supposedly true love unable to look away from her dramatically transformed appearance. Next came Mingzhu's inevitable tragic loss. Her baby still couldn't be saved or protected despite all medical precautions and prayers. Although she no longer wore the dangerous sachet following my warning about its contents, because of her fundamentally ruined constitution from years of systematic abuse and forced abortions in the brothels, the developing child still couldn't possibly survive in her damaged womb. The pregnancy ended in massive blood loss and overwhelming grief. Xiaomai, terrified of accidentally encountering her former mistress and being confronted publicly with her betrayal and shameful behavior, carefully avoided everything and everyone connected to Qianxue, not fighting or competing for Ziming's attention at all, keeping herself strategically invisible and non-threatening. For a considerable time, Qianxue completely monopolized Ziming's favor, attention, and intimate time. Whenever servants came to report on household situations and developments to me, there was always one consistent sentence repeated at the end of their detailed reports. Miss Bai still regularly burns that special incense the master enjoys so much. The master appears to like it very much indeed and spends most nights there. After a reasonable period passed, seeing I still absolutely refused to return to the household despite multiple increasingly urgent hints and requests, Ziming came personally to my mother's home to urge me directly several times with various excuses. But having already left that dangerous place and established myself securely here, how could I possibly return voluntarily to the wolf's den where he plotted my death? Seeing he couldn't successfully summon me back through normal persuasion or veiled threats, he finally sent Qianxue to attempt persuasion as his emissary. She didn't actually invite me to return to the manor at all as he'd probably instructed. Instead, she lowered her head with apparent complete obedience, dutifully recounting the current household situation in careful, neutral detail for quite some time. This report wasn't significantly different from information I already possessed through my own carefully placed sources and spies. After she'd talked for several minutes about mundane household matters, she casually mentioned that particular fragrance again, the incense Ziming supposedly enjoyed so much. I cut her short deliberately, my hand trembling very slightly while trimming decorative flowers that were growing sideways in their expensive pot. Just remember to take the antidote on time, every single day without fail. She visibly gritted her teeth hard, her voice shaking. I escaped death by the absolute narrowest hair's breadth imaginable. With revenge not yet fully taken and accomplished against those who destroyed me, naturally I must treasure my life carefully now and survive. I glanced at her with new, reassessing eyes, genuinely surprised by her progress. You're advancing quite quickly in understanding harsh reality. Indeed, innocence and naive trust cannot overcome or survive genuine hardship, betrayal, and brutal truth. Finally, Qianxue presented a disturbingly, sickeningly familiar sachet from her sleeve, holding it out toward me with both trembling hands. This is what the master specifically ordered me to deliver to Madame personally with his own instructions. The master says this item represents his heart and complete devotion. He's desperately hoping Madame will carry it daily close to her body, never forgetting his deep feelings for you. My heart surged with intense, overwhelming hatred once again, nearly choking me. I clenched my fists until my nails cut deeply into my palms, drawing blood. Here it comes again. He raises the butcher's knife toward me once more, attempting to murder me and my precious baby a second time. Seeing me remain completely silent, staring at the sachet with visible tension and barely controlled rage, Qianxue unusually also said absolutely nothing more. She simply stood quietly waiting, watching my reaction carefully. Having delivered the token as specifically instructed by Master, I'll take my leave now, Madam. I softly agreed, deliberately not detaining her or prolonging this encounter. But when she reached the threshold, preparing to step outside and leave, she suddenly turned around and dropped to her knees heavily, lowering her head, saying nothing at all for a long moment. After an extremely long, heavy silence stretching unbearably, she finally gritted her teeth with visible determination and desperate resolve. Madam, you absolutely cannot carry this sachet. Don't wear it ever. I smiled coldly, my voice flat and completely unsurprised. I know. I've always known exactly what it contains and what it would do. She suddenly jerked her head up sharply, meeting my eyes that understood absolutely everything from the beginning. Shock and realization flooded her devastated expression. You already knew everything? From the very beginning you understood. I picked up the sachet carefully between two fingers, then deliberately threw it directly into the nearby brazier, letting hungry flames immediately devour the exquisite embroidery and lethal contents completely. If the master enjoys that particular fragrance so very much, then he should burn much, much more of it constantly in his own quarters. Let him breathe it deeply every single day and night. Smoke rose in hazy, twisting patterns throughout the room. I lowered my eyes, my voice deadly calm and certain. When the time finally comes and the baby has only a few months remaining before being born, we absolutely cannot allow this innocent child to bear the terrible stigma of patricide. Early summer arrived with blooming flowers and gentle warmth blanketing everything. The young Marquis Chen Ziming suddenly passed away completely unexpectedly at the height of his youth and power. After the imperial physicians conducted their thorough examination of the body, their official conclusion stated he died from a sudden, massive stroke during intimate activities. The woman he loved most desperately, Qianxue, had died at the exact moment of their deepest, most intimate physical connection in his bed. Some whispered with knowing looks he'd literally loved her to death through excessive passion, while others speculated about the suspicious timing given the history of conflict between the women in his household. I returned to the household immediately to manage the overall chaotic situation and elaborate funeral arrangements. Chen Hua returned ahead of me to the manor, whispering final instructions in my ear with quiet satisfaction and barely suppressed pride in our success. Everything has been handled cleanly and completely, miss. No trace of anything suspicious remains anywhere. I nodded slightly in acknowledgement, then immediately began crying loudly and dramatically for all to witness, holding my prominently pregnant belly while falling before the elaborate coffin in apparent complete devastation. Master, how could you possibly leave like this so suddenly? How could you abandon us without warning? How absolutely pitiful for me and the innocent child still growing in my belly. How shall we possibly live and survive from now on without you? I cried with convincingly realistic pain, looking appropriately frightful and grief-stricken, my expensive robes disheveled. Others observing this dramatic scene gossiped even more intensely, spreading rumors throughout the entire capital within hours. The Marquis Chen, married barely 1 year, already had multiple concubines pregnant and living in luxury. He looked like a proper, restrained gentleman on the surface, but was actually an insatiable, lustful person behind closed doors. You truly cannot judge people by their misleading appearances alone. How terribly unfortunate for the devoted legitimate madam who was utterly faithful to him. Now she must struggle alone to raise an orphan from the womb. So tragic and unfair. I had only cried perhaps 2 dramatic sentences when I heard significant commotion outside the funeral hall. Mother-in-law's voice cut through sharply, screaming accusations and blame. Return my son to me. Return my precious son immediately. I raised such an apparently ungrateful creature, wasted all my good treatment of her. Ziming loved her so much, yet this lowly woman somehow took his life. Being physically attacked and torn at by her, Qianxue endured the violent beating and extremely harsh scolding without fighting back, keeping her head lowered submissively without speaking at all, making her true expression completely unclear to observers. Seeing me standing there watching calmly, mother-in-law immediately redirected her furious attack toward me instead, her grief turning to rage. You're the mistress of this household. You didn't properly take care of your husband, staying selfishly at your mother's home all day long. You also bear heavy responsibility for Ziming's untimely death. She charged directly at me to push violently with her full strength. Though Chen Hua and other servants quickly blocked in front protectively, preventing her from actually touching me at all, I still felt my belly suddenly tighten painfully. A distinctly warm flow came from below my body, soaking my inner robes. Chen Hua, Nanishan, I think I'm about to give birth right now. In the resulting chaos and panic with everyone rushing around, I smoothly delivered a healthy baby boy after surprisingly short labor. Right after his birth and first cry, official representatives from the palace arrived to read an imperial edict, formally conferring upon me the prestigious title of first-rank noble lady. My newborn son also directly inherited his father's noble title according to law, becoming the youngest marquis in the entire court's history. Absolutely no one objected or questioned this arrangement. Only my mother-in-law, already completely grief-stricken beyond all reason and rumored to have harbored malicious intentions of harming her own innocent grandchild, heard this news and grew so violently angry she suffered a massive stroke. Not long after, she passed away as well, following her son into death. When everything finally settled into calm, stable routine several months later, Xiaomai came formally to offer her sincere apology. Previously, I betrayed my mistress as a completely faithless, disloyal person. Now I've come specifically to apologize sincerely and completely, hoping Madam will find it in her generous heart to forgive me. I gestured for Chen Hua to help her stand immediately from her prostrate position. It's not such a terrible thing you did under the circumstances. Survival is natural. But some punishment is still necessary and appropriate for form's sake. I'll punish you by making you the manager at my newly opened incense shop in the capital. Do you agree to accept this position? Xiaomai was so overwhelmed with happy relief and gratitude she cried continuously, kowtowing repeatedly until I ordered her to stop. This servant is extremely willing and honored. Thank you, madam, for your incredible grace and mercy. I had investigated her background thoroughly beforehand. She'd originally worked in her family's successful incense business before misfortune struck them. Later, her father became addicted to gambling and pawned the profitable shop to pay mounting debts. Before being sold into service to pay his debts, she'd helped her parents conduct business operations for a long time, definitely possessing genuine business acumen and valuable talent. Rather than letting her waste such valuable talent confined uselessly within the household performing menial tasks, it seemed infinitely better to release her outside to be independent, productive, and profitable for both of us. The opposite situation applied to Mingzhu. She feared desperately that I would drive her out of the household entirely, crying pitifully whenever the subject arose or seemed imminent. "Please, madam, I'm begging you, don't send me away. I've wandered the harsh red dust for half my miserable life." It wasn't easy finally coming to this household to enjoy some peace, security, and fortune. I absolutely don't want to continue suffering outside in poverty and danger. She made me laugh with genuine amusement at her desperate, raw honesty. I understood her position and fears completely. She'd experienced countless hardships, degradations, and abuse. It hadn't been easy obtaining this relatively peaceful, secure situation. "Then I'll support and keep you comfortably for your entire life. It's just a convenient matter for me anyway with my resources." Qianxue came last to see me before departing forever. She wore plain white clothes again, exactly like when we'd first met at the tea ceremony. "Is this mourning for your mother, or mourning for your precious brother Ziming?" She slowly knelt with deliberate, careful movements. Her eyes revealed unexpected calmness and cold indifference I'd never witnessed before in her. "Neither one, actually. I'm mourning my own wronged, completely wasted love. The love I foolishly gave to someone completely unworthy who destroyed everything." She paused, gathering courage, then continued. "Madam has already granted grace and mercy to 2 other people. I also want to request one thing. Please, madam, let me go. Release me from this household and these memories." I raised my head from the cradle where my baby slept peacefully, looking at her with genuine interest and some respect. "Why isn't staying securely in the household good enough for you? You'd have guaranteed security, food, shelter, comfort." Qianxue's voice was quiet but surprisingly firm and resolved. "My home is completely gone. My family destroyed. My companion is dead. My revenge has been fully taken. My love has been shattered into worthless pieces. Absolutely nothing in this world makes me want to linger here anymore. Perhaps I should go outside, travel around freely, maybe eventually find some new meaning or purpose to continue living beyond all this pain and betrayal." I agreed with her assessment and request immediately without hesitation. Qianxue gratefully took the extremely generous travel money I provided and went to seek her own freedom and dreams under the vast sky, finally released permanently from this place of concentrated suffering and devastating betrayal. After she left quietly, Chen Hua couldn't help asking curiously, "Miss, you never actually investigated her family matter before this. How did you possibly know the master really provided that crucial evidence to the emperor about Governor Bai?" I smiled faintly, my expression knowing and weary. Whether I actually knew the truth or not no longer matters at all now. After all, she already completely believed it happened, didn't she? That belief and her resulting actions are what actually mattered for my purposes. In the end, Qianxue was also genuinely pitiful. Though stupid, blind, and foolishly trusting, she wasn't fundamentally evil to her core or irredeemably wicked. If she was willing to become my blade for necessary revenge, I'd give her a viable path to continue living afterward, accumulating some virtue and positive karma for myself and my innocent son. If she hadn't been willing to help when I needed her, I'm quite afraid she would now be sharing Ziming's fate in the afterlife instead of traveling free under open skies. Gentle breeze blowing softly, warm sunshine spreading golden light everywhere. I lowered my head, tenderly kissing my peacefully sleeping child's impossibly soft face, breathing in his sweet infant scent. Previous life's hatred fully repaid. This life's obstacles completely removed. Now we can finally live in peace and prosperity. The story cleverly exposes the true face of false love through careful observation of small details and consistent actions rather than empty words and promises. The lesson about self-respect, clarity, and wisdom in relationships is profound and timeless. True love isn't measured by grand gestures or sweet words alone, but by genuine respect, honest behavior, and sincere care demonstrated through consistent actions over time. Lin Wanying's tragic tale teaches us that deception, even disguised as protection, ultimately destroys trust and relationships completely. Her husband Chen Ziming claimed to protect his true love through elaborate cruelty and public coldness. But real love doesn't require such twisted, complicated games or theatrical performances. The story reminds us to judge people by their actual actions, not their convenient words or promises. Don't sacrifice your dignity for someone who won't openly cherish you. Most importantly, when given a second chance at life, choose wisdom over blind revenge. Protect yourself first and surround yourself only with those who genuinely value you. If you enjoyed this tale of rebirth and revenge, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Lotus Tale Studios for more captivating stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may you always recognize true love from false promises.